In the late 19th century, a brilliant mathematician named Évariste Galois found himself in an impossible situation. He was only 20 years old, but he had already revolutionized mathematics. His ideas were radical, incomprehensible to most of his peers, and so ahead of their time that even the greatest minds of the era struggled to understand them. But his genius came at a cost. He had made enemies, both politically and personally. And now he had been challenged to a duel, a fight he likely knew he wouldn't survive. The night before, knowing that his time was running out, he didn't run, didn't fight, didn't beg for his life. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He wrote. He spent the last hours of his life frantically scribbling down everything he had discovered, desperately trying to ensure his work wouldn't be lost forever. He wasn't thinking about his past, his reputation, or even his death. He was simply aware. And here's the paradox. He had never been more alive than in the face of death. Something happened in those final moments. His ego collapsed. The illusion of self, of time, of identity. It all disappeared. What remained was pure focus, pure awareness, pure existence. No distractions, no doubts, just truth. And yet, isn't this exactly what happens when we search for the observer? We assume that to find who we truly are, we need to search, analyze, think more deeply. But what if the search itself is the obstacle? It's like trying to find the horizon by running toward it. The faster you go, the further it moves away. The moment you ask, "Who am I?" the question itself creates the illusion of a you that must be found. But there was never a separate you to find, only awareness itself. This is why Zen masters often answered questions with silence. Not because they didn't know, but because any answer would create a new false layer of self. A monk once asked his teacher, "Who am I?" The master smiled and replied, "Find the one who is asking." And in that moment, the student realized there was no separate I to find, only this moment. But this paradox wasn't only understood by Zen masters. The Lankavatara Sutra, a foundational Buddhist text, describes perception in a way that completely shatters our understanding of self. The seen is in the seeing, the hearing is in the heard. At first, this seems like an abstract riddle, but it's pointing to something profound. It means there is no separation between the observer and what is observed. Your experience of the world is not happening outside of you. It is happening within awareness itself. The sound of a bird singing doesn't exist in a separate reality. It exists within your perception of it. The warmth of the sun, the feeling of sadness, the thoughts running through your mind, none of these are separate from awareness. If everything is happening within awareness, then who is the one experiencing it? Do you see the paradox? The moment you try to grasp the observer, it disappears. It's like trying to hear silence. The act of listening makes it vanish. And yet, silence is always there, just as awareness has always been here. So what happens when you stop trying to find the observer and instead just let yourself be? Let's go even deeper. Because this isn't just a philosophy. It's something backed by neuroscience, psychology, and even physics. There's a phenomenon in neuroscience that has left scientists questioning the very foundation of human perception. It's called blind sight, a rare condition where a person is clinically blind but can still see without realizing it. Take the case of a man known as patient TN, a man who, due to brain damage, lost the ability to see. Completely blind, he had no conscious awareness of vision. And yet, when researchers placed obstacles in front of him and asked him to walk forward, something astonishing happened. He dodged every obstacle perfectly without seeing them. How is this possible? His conscious mind, the part of him that thinks, that narrates, that believes it is in control, was completely unaware of what was happening. But a deeper silent awareness was still functioning. Something beyond thought, beyond identity. This is where things get strange. If a person can see without seeing, What does that say about the nature of awareness itself? If thoughts appear before we think them, if vision happens without conscious recognition, then who is actually experiencing reality? The observer or something deeper? Most people believe that they are their thoughts, that their mind is the center of experience. But cases like patient TN suggest otherwise. Your conscious mind is not the full story. And in fact, it might be nothing more than an interpreter, a small part of you that takes credit for something much bigger. This is where we enter the paradox of self-inquiry. The harder you try to find the observer, the further away it seems. Because just like TN's vision, awareness doesn't need the mind to function. This brings us to something even more unsettling. If your awareness exists before thoughts, if your perception happens before the I claims it, then the observer you are looking for is not separate from the experience itself. Now, let's step out of science for a moment, because there's another way to experience this truth, not through research, but through direct realization. Close your eyes for a moment. Now ask yourself a question. Before you think your next thought, where is it? Where does it come from? What color is it? What shape? Did you notice what happened? There was a gap, a moment where no thought appeared, and yet you were still there. Something was present, but it wasn't a thought. It wasn't a story. It wasn't the voice in your head. It was you, not the idea of you, not the thoughts about you. Just awareness itself. That's the paradox. The observer is not something you can grasp, because the moment you try, you create another layer of illusion. The truth was there all along, hidden beneath the noise of seeking. If you are not your thoughts, if awareness exists without identification, then why does the mind keep reinforcing a false sense of self? The answer lies in how your brain functions. There's something called the default mode network, DMN. It's the part of your brain that constantly generates a sense of I. It's active when you're daydreaming and when you're imagining the future. And here's the crucial part. It's also what creates the illusion of separation. Studies show that when people enter deep meditation or even take psychedelics, the DMN quiets down. And what happens? They describe feeling a sense of unity with everything. The idea of being a separate individual dissolves. This is why spiritual traditions have emphasized stillness, silence, and presence. Because the less active the DMN, the clearer reality becomes. You're not separate from what is happening. That's just a trick of the mind. Now, let's look at this in real life. There's a story of a man named Jed McKenna, an ex-military soldier who spent years searching for enlightenment. He meditated, he read every book on spirituality, and he spent years seeking the truth. Something unexpected happened. He was arrested, thrown into a prison cell cut off from the world with nothing but time and silence. And in that stillness, something collapsed. The ego, the illusion of a separate self. At first, he panicked. But as the days passed, he realized that the prison wasn't just outside, it had always been inside his own mind. And in that realization, he became free. Because the paradox is this. The more you fight the mind, the stronger it becomes. The more you resist thoughts, the more they control you. But the moment you stop trying to escape, you already have. And this is not just philosophy. This understanding has been at the core of ancient wisdom for thousands of years. In Zen Buddhism, there is a famous story about a monk who went to his teacher and said, "Master, I am trying so hard to find my true self." The master simply asked, "Who is trying?" The monk was silent. That silence, that instant moment of stopping, was the answer. Because the moment you try to grasp the observer, you have already moved away from it. It's not something you can hold, but something you can rest into. And this is what most people miss. They believe awakening is about acquiring something, a new realization, a new understanding, a new way of thinking. But the truth is, it's the opposite. It's not about adding anything. It's about removing everything that isn't real. Because what's left when you stop searching? Not a thought, not a definition, just this, right here, right now. There's a reason that the most skilled athletes, musicians, and artists enter what is known as flow state, a moment where their mind goes silent and they perform at their highest level. Think about it. The best performances don't come from overthinking. They come from letting go. A musician doesn't play from thought. They become the music. A surfer doesn't control the wave. They move with it. A master swordsman in ancient Japan didn't think about each movement. They became the movement itself. The same is true for you. When you stop seeking the observer, you become the observer. You don't have to find yourself. You don't have to discover something new. All you have to do is stop looking elsewhere, because what you are looking for is what is looking. The next time you find yourself lost in thought, stop and ask yourself, who is the one watching all of this? Who is aware? Because the moment you truly look, you'll realize something incredible. You were never lost. You were never separate. You were never searching. You were always here.